At 13:10 hours local time, off the Russian port of Tuapse, two gray shapes came out of the open sea at 68 miles an hour and drove into the flank of a Suezmax crude oil tanker. They stood barely 3 feet above the water, too low for radar to pull them out of the wave clutter, too fast for anything that small. Each carried nearly 1,000 pounds of explosive in its nose, and each cost a fraction of a single missile. They were called Mamai, and they had crossed more than 200 miles of open water to reach the far eastern corner of the Black Sea, the water Russia had pulled back into precisely because it was supposed to be unreachable. The ship was the Louise 1. Panama flag, Liberia before that, Greece before that. In 2026 alone, she had moved close to 3 million tons of Urals crude out of Russian ports with her transponder switched off. A ship that had spent years learning how not to be seen. Russian aircraft came down to meet the drones, multi-million-dollar warplanes, dropping to wave-top height to fire machine guns at a boat. They missed, and the tanker kept going. 1,000 pounds of high explosive into her hull, and the Louise 1 held her course, engines turning, still making way for the Russian coast. In the tracking data the world reads, she carried a status line that looked like a verdict on the whole operation. Underway using engine, still sailing, still Russia's, in Moscow, that is a win! Kiev had thrown its best weapon at a tanker in Russia's safest water, and the ship had shrugged. Then the second one surfaced in that same data. 3 words Moscow could not switch off, delete, or reflag, not under command. To understand what Ukraine was really attacking, you have to understand what the Louise 1 and the Banda actually are. Not warships, not military transports. On paper, they are ordinary commercial tankers, and that is the entire point. Russia's shadow fleet is a legal fiction floating on salt water. When Ukraine sanctioned 91 of these vessels, they sailed under the flags of roughly 20 different countries. Exactly 1 was Russian. The rest hid behind Panama, Liberia, Cameroon, the Marshall Islands, Barbados, Palau, Comoros, registries that ask few questions, old hulls, blurred ownership, thin insurance, transponders that go dark at the right moment. Every layer is designed to make one simple thing impossible to prove: that this oil is Russian and that this money buys artillery shells. The Banda ran the circuit. Ust-Luga on the Baltic, Kerch, Novorossiysk, Nakodka on the Pacific, most recently Kulivi in Georgia, then back to Novorossiysk, Russia's largest oil outlet on the Black Sea, and that water carries more than 20% of every barrel of crude Russia ships by sea. Just up the coast, the Tuapse refinery and terminal push around 12 million tons of oil a year. Together, Tuapse and Novorossiysk are the main gate the Shadow Fleet sails through. Here is the bitter irony. This is the corner Russia retreated to. Ukrainian sea drones drove the Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol and pushed Russian warships more than 200 miles from Ukraine's coast. Novorossiysk was the answer. Tuapse and Sochi, further east still, were safer than that. This was the rear of the rear. The place Moscow believed was untouchable. The head of Ukraine's security service, Vasyl Malyuk, has a name for this campaign. He calls it Kinetic Sanctions. It is worth sitting with that phrase because it explains everything about how this war is now being fought at sea. Sanctions are paperwork. Sanctions are a price cap, a registry check, a letter to a bank. They took years to write. They cover hundreds of vessels, and Russian oil kept flowing anyway, because a hull that changes its flag 3 times is faster than a committee. A Mamai does not need a committee. It needs 1,000 pounds of explosive and a bearing. On paper, the Shadow Fleet was untouchable. Panamanian flags, Liberian registries, ownership dissolved through 3 shell companies in 2 jurisdictions, an entire architecture built so that no government could lay a hand on it. But the battlefield does not run on registries. A drone boat cannot read a flag. And the numbers moved almost immediately. Since late November, at least 7 tankers hauling Russian crude have taken critical damage. War risk premiums for ships trading in the Black Sea jumped as much as 300% in early December, then doubled again in January. Russian seaborne crude exports through the Black Sea fell by 30%. Moscow is now short of tankers at the exact moment it needs to export more to keep the revenue coming. Sanctions took 4 years to bite. This took 10 weeks, because Ukraine was not trying to sink the fleet. It cannot sink hundreds of tankers, it does not need to. They only needed to make the underwriter flinch. The weapon is named after Kozak Mamai, a folk hero from Ukrainian puppet theater. A wanderer with a horse and a lute. The SBU turned him into this. Roughly 1,000 pounds of explosive in the nose, triggered by contact sensors at the bow. A planing hull that lifts and skims once it is up to speed. A satellite antenna tucked inside a rounded radome so the crew can steer it far beyond the horizon. 3 feet of freeboard, 68 miles an hour. The SBU calls it the fastest object in the Black Sea, and it does not have to be a bomb. The same boat serves as a radio relay or as a launch platform for other weapons. Mamai is combat-proven. It helped kill the landing ship Olenigorsky Gornyak and the tanker Sig. Against it, Russia has built 4 layers. Furthest out, the BE-12, a Soviet-era flying boat hunting for wakes. Behind it, fighters, Su-30s, Su-27s, Su-35s, MiG-29s scramble to kill a boat. Closer in, the helicopters, Mi-8s with door guns, and the Ka-29 Helix, a heavily armed naval assault machine carrying rocket pods, a twin-barrel cannon, and Ataka missiles. Russia's entire navy has 27 of them. Innermost, the harbor itself. Barges and boom barriers physically sealing the entrance at Novorossiysk, under a canopy of S-400s, S-300s, Pantsirs, and Tors. On paper, that is a wall. But look closely at what every one of those systems was designed to do. Kill an aircraft at altitude, kill a warship at range, kill something big, hot, and high. Not one of them was built to kill a 3-foot-tall boat doing 68 miles an hour through wave clutter. Which is why, in the end, they came down and used machine guns. Start with the problem Russia could not solve because it is a problem of physics, not of equipment. The Black Sea has no terrain, no ridgelines, no tree lines, no radar horizon to hide behind. Everything out here is visible in every direction, which should make a drone boat the easiest target ever built. It is flat, empty, and there is nowhere to go. Except the sea is not flat. At 3 feet of freeboard, a Mamai does not sit on the water so much as inside it. Every swell is a wall. Every whitecap throws back a radar return of roughly the same size and shape as the thing you are hunting. A search radar sweeping that surface does not see an empty ocean with one boat on it. It sees 10,000 returns, and one of them is trying to kill you. So somewhere out there, a B-12 is flying. A Soviet flying boat older than most of the men aboard it, dragging a search pattern across the water looking for a wake. That is the whole trick. You do not find the boat, you find the scar it leaves behind. And here is the arithmetic that decides everything that follows. A Mamai at 68 miles an hour covers 100 feet every second. A radar operator staring at that clutter needs a few seconds just to decide whether a contact is a wave or a weapon. Call it 6 seconds, 6 seconds of maybe, 600 feet, not a mistake, not incompetence, just a man doing his job at human speed against something that does not have to think. The contact firms up, the call goes out, and Russia sends the most expensive answer it owns. Su-30s, Su-20s, Su-30s, MiG-20s, aircraft designed to hunt other aircraft at 20 miles, carrying radars built to find a fighter against open sky, and missiles that need a hot engine to lock onto. Now imagine you are that pilot. Your target is 3 feet tall. It has no engine heat worth speaking of, no radar signature worth the name, and it is sitting in the one place your entire aircraft is worst at looking, straight down into the water. Your missiles are useless. Every weapon you trained on for a decade is useless. So you do the only thing left. You come down. You bring a $30 million interceptor to wave top height, throttle back until the airframe is barely flying, and point the nose at a boat. Now you are slow, low, and predictable. The exact profile every air defense manual on Earth tells you never to fly. And you get one pass. At your speed, the gun solution lasts a couple of seconds. Miss, and you cannot simply turn around. A jet that size buys its turn in miles. By the time you come back around, the boat has moved another half mile toward the tanker, and you have to find it again, in the clutter from the beginning. Russia's Air Force did not fail here because it was weak. It failed because it was wrong. It was a scalpel sent to swat a fly. Which raises the question worth arguing about in the comments. Is a fighter jet still an asset if the thing it is hunting costs less than its fuel bill? There is one layer that genuinely works, and Russia knows it. Not the jets, the helicopters. Mi-8s with door gunners, Ka-29 heavily armed naval machines with rocket pods and cannon, and the single most effective weapon anyone has found against a drone boat, a missile fired from a helicopter and steered by hand through an optical sight by a man watching the boat all the way in slow, manual, almost 19th century. It works, but look at the price of it. To guide by eye, you must stay. You must hold position, low and close, and keep looking. And the Black Sea has already taught Russia what happens to helicopters that hold position over Ukrainian drones. A naval drone shot down an Mi-8 in flight with a repurposed Soviet air-to-air missile, then took another, then damaged a third. Later, they brought down a Su-30. That is the trap Russia is in. Its most effective anti-drone weapon requires the hunter to stand still, and standing still is exactly how the hunter dies. And now the detail that changes the shape of this entire operation. This was never one attack. The maritime intelligence firm Ambry put the strike on the Panama-flagged tanker off Tuapse. The SBU's own footage placed strikes off Novorossiysk and Sochi. Those are not neighbors. Those are separate stretches of a long coastline, which means the second group did not attack a sleeping defense. It attacked one that was already awake, with aircraft airborne, radios hot, and every ship on that coast warned. Whatever surprise the first strike bought, the second crew had to pay full price. The aircraft did what they could, machine guns from wave-top height against a boat that was cornering underneath them. Bombs dropped at a target 3 feet tall and moving at 100 feet per second. According to the SBU, and this is Ukraine's account, carried on Ukraine's video, none of it worked. Then the contact sensors in the bow touched steel, 1,000 pounds of explosive against a tanker's flank at the waterline. The hull opens, the sea does the rest, and the sea is patient. It does not need fire. Water finds the compartments, the trim goes, and somewhere below decks, the machinery that lets a ship be a ship starts to drown. But not on the Louise one. She took it and she kept her course, engines turning, making way for the Russian coast, underway using engine. In the tracking data the whole world reads, the Louise one looked like proof that Ukraine had thrown its best weapon at Russia's safest water and failed. That was the loss already calculated, because hours later, the Bonda surfaced in that same data, an Aframax crude tanker, Liberian flag, last position in the Black Sea, and her status line read, "Not under command." Understand what that means, because it is not a Ukrainian claim. It is not a press release or a telegram post or a hero shot from a drone camera. It is the international language of the sea, and it means one thing: this vessel can no longer maneuver. She cannot steer. She cannot answer. She goes where the water takes her. Nobody in Kiev wrote those words. The ship wrote them about herself to everyone. And there is the chain reaction. It just did not look like one. There was no fire spreading car to car, no secondary detonation walking down the length of a train. The blast went somewhere else entirely. It went into the shipping data, into the war risk files, onto the desks of the underwriters in London who decide what it costs to point a hull at Novorossiysk. Think about the machinery Russia had built. 20 flags of convenience. Ownership dissolved through shell companies. Transponders switched off in the dark. Years of engineering, all of it aimed at one goal: make these ships invisible. And in the end, the Shadow Fleet was betrayed by the only system it could never switch off. The one that tells the rest of the world whether a ship can still steer. Destruction burns a ship, paralysis closes a sea. On July 10th at 1810 local time, Russia's FSB border guards told shipping companies they would stop accepting applications to transit the Kerch Strait. Moscow suspended the Don Azov Channel. No date was given for reopening. In 11 days, the number of Russian vessels in the Sea of Azov fell from 267 to 120, a 55% collapse, according to the Institute for the Study of War. Wheat futures in Europe jumped 4% to a 6-week high because up to a quarter of Russian wheat exports passed through that water. Nobody sank the Sea of Azov. Russia closed it with its own hands because staying open had become more expensive than shutting down. Analysts now compare the intensity of this campaign to the Iran-Iraq tanker war of the 1980s and say it has matched it or passed it. But there is a line in this story worth being honest about. Ambrey noted that this strike marked a departure. Until now, Ukraine had hit vessels under international sanctions. The Bonda carries only Ukraine's. The map of legitimate targets just got wider, and the men on those hulls are civilian crews from third countries. That is the other side of the ledger, and it does not disappear because the cause is just. Russia can hide a ship from satellites, it can switch off a transponder, reflag a hull 3 times, bury an owner under shell companies in 2 jurisdictions. It cannot hide 3 words. So here's the question. 4 years of Western sanctions, or a boat that costs less than a fighter jet's fuel bill? Which one actually stopped the oil? Tell me in the comments. If you support Peace for Ukraine, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.